Welcome back to Novel Writing 101, the 21-week course where I teach you how to write the first draft of your novel. This is week 20 and it's our final week of Section B, Writing and Execution. Today I'm going to give you some advice on final pages and finishing strong, so let's get into it. So like I said, it's week 20 and week 16 of Section B, Writing and Execution. This is our final week of finishing our first draft. If you stuck with me thus far, you've come a long way in this course and you should be, like I said, on the brink of finishing that first draft. Now, like we touched on last week, endings are very important to your book. This is your last opportunity to make an impact on the reader and leave them with something that'll have them thinking about your book for days or years to come. But aside from punchy one-liners and plot twists you may throw in at the end, there is one piece of advice above all else that is most important about your final pages, and that is you need to finish them. Remember, this is a first draft, so you don't have to get it perfect the first time. So yes, when it comes to final pages, it is important to have something substantial happen or some punchy one-liner that really grips your reader or leaves the message of the story flat on the table, but finishing the book is really the most important of them all, especially in this stage. I know I've said this so many times throughout the course, it's probably getting old, but it is so true. The first draft is for you telling the story to yourself. You're essentially just word vomiting the story onto the page. So you don't really need that punchy one-liner now, but you do need to finish the book. You need to wrap everything up, and no, it doesn't have to be pretty and polished and perfect right now, but you do need to have some conclusive ending, so when you go back and do all these editing rounds, you have the full picture. And depending where you're at in the first draft process, maybe you're a couple chapters away from your ending still, you may feel like, Angie, why are you telling me that it's important to finish the book? Like, of course I'm going to finish the book. That's the whole point. But something happens when you get very, very close to the end of finishing your first draft and you kind of get a little bit of hesitation. You start thinking, oh, this is like the last chapter, like this is a really big deal, and you start putting pressure on yourself, you might get a little bit of imposter syndrome, and all of a sudden you don't actually write the ending. Again, this is kind of just one of those things about the creative process where we get in our heads and we like essentially self-sabotage because like we know like this means a lot and this is important to us. And so we start thinking of reasons and ways that like this won't work out. For instance, I am working on the first draft of my horror novel, and I have one final chapter and then the epilogue to write. I have to finish it this week. I have my deadline set. I have the days scheduled of when I'm writing, and I don't know if scared is the right word. I'm hesitating for sure. Because again, in my head, I'm like, this is the final fight scene. This is a big deal. There's a lot that goes into this. And even though the prior two chapters I wrote in like 3 days total and I felt really strongly about them, there's still something that's like, are you sure you can do this? And this is coming from someone that's written 5 first drafts at this point. So I should know better. So that's what I mean when I say the most important part of your final pages is to finish them. Because sometimes when you're that close to the finish line, your mind can kind of do some tricks on you. But aside from any self-sabotage you may be feeling, let's circle back to those final pages and how we're going to finish strong. Now, again, last week we talked about endings when it comes to impact, message, and loose ends, and that plays a very important role of what we're doing today and this week. We want to think about what message we're sending the reader, how certain character actions or conclusions may impact them, and anything that we haven't explained that we may or may not want to at this point. Now, I've read books with amazing endings and final pages, and I've read books where I'm like, I loved this until about 5 pages ago, and now I'm disappointed. So it's important that you do finish strong and don't kind of like run out of steam when it gets to the end of your book. This means pushing through, especially if you're at the stage where you're like, I'm done with this, I just want to be done. I want to implore you to not just like rush your way through the final pages and actually make sure you're wrapping it up in a way that does justice to your story. Trust me, you do not want to have gone through all these 21 weeks of work and then when you're editing go, this sucks. And especially if it sucks because you just didn't put the effort in. So push through. Really nail down these final pages, whatever that means to you. Maybe you're tying up loose ends. Maybe you're thinking of one really punchy one-liner of dialogue to end the story with. Maybe you need to think of a way for your villain to be defeated that doesn't seem like Deus Ex Machina. Or maybe this is the first book in a series and you need to think of a way to tease what comes next and get the reader excited to learn more. So again, don't rush your final pages. Sit with it, understand what you need to accomplish, know that you can revise this in future editing rounds, but finish strong and finish the story. That's all I have for you guys today. Really, the most important thing, again, is that you finish these final pages and you finish your first draft. You can revise your story and edit, but just make sure you finish this course with a solid first draft that is your foundation from which you can build upon. Your homework for this week is to finish those final pages. Keep writing, button up that first draft, and have your story ready for the editing phase. Next week, we're just going to do a really quick kind of course wrap up. We're going to talk about what may be coming next in the editing phases. And yeah, a little bit of celebration. So I hope you guys have a great week, this last week of writing. Until then, happy writing, and I'll see you next time.